Hi, everybody. Welcome to our session today. My name is Aisling Nolan, and I am the VP of Customer Success here at SmartLink. I'm joined here today by Darcy Stacey, who is the Manager of Knowledge Management at Affirm. And what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to hear Darcy tell us a little bit about how Affirm has scaled localization despite macroeconomic constraints. Darcy, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at Affirm before we get started?
Yeah, happy to. I currently manage all of our Affirm's support content. So what that really means is our agent knowledge, as well as all of our help centers for both our customer and merchant sides of the house. And then we also manage our localization across the board, specifically for our engineering groups, comms groups, and support content.
Very good. Okay. So yeah, tell me a little bit more about the different content types that Affirm translates. Have you always translated all of those different content types, or how has that evolved?
Yeah, so as we moved into Canada and decided that we would scale in that market, we actually acquired a company named Piperight. So what they did is they had people all within the company that were helping with human translation, really at the end of the day, helping localize to that market and then translating it themselves to Canadian French. And what we have decided to do is really centralize that instead of having people have to do that all over the place. We have decided let them focus on their day jobs and really centralize it so we can leverage SmartLink to the greatest extent possible. And what we really are doing is translating our site strings specifically for our app and website, as well as our comms that go out on a regular basis to our customers, and then our help center and any support content we have related to our merchants and consumers, as well as our internal content for our agents. So specifically like our talking points and email templates and things like that that we provide.
Okay. I know that you took over localization at Affirm relatively recently. Can you walk us through what were some of the challenges that Affirm faced when you started working with them on localization? And I'd love to hear about how have you worked to solve those challenges too.
Yeah, so when I joined Affirm, we were just scaling into Canada and a company named PayBright we had actually acquired. So there are quite a few people internally that were actually localizing themselves or translating themselves. And we wanted them to be able to focus on their day jobs. So we decided to pull that work into my team, specifically with the translation review step, to make sure that we could confirm what was going through SmartLink and validate that that is exactly what we want, and to validate that we need to build out our glossary of terms because that basically didn't exist when I first got it. So it's been challenging to pull all of those different things together, but we have definitely centralized that over the last couple of years.
Okay. And as you were working to solve those challenges, what were some of the goals that you and your team were working to achieve?
Yeah, so some of the goals we were working to achieve were to make sure that we had projects set up for each of the different content types that were coming through. So that way we could really automate as much as possible and spend as little time as possible ourselves, because this isn't my full-time job. So making sure that we could, and then paying attention to costs and trying to help the business understand the costs of needing to localize, and the fact that we need to actually localize to Canadian English and then translate to Canadian French. Because of being in finance, we needed to make sure that we were really meeting the people where they're at in their local geography so that we're speaking their language. And quality is still our number one. So when it comes down to everything, we're just making sure that we have the highest quality content possible and that the end users that are using it really understand that we are meeting them where they're at in their country. Budgeting challenges, we tend to have one budget as we go into a country, and then we need to split that out between groups. So our main challenge right now is that one of our projects is actually multiple different teams. So figuring out how we actually divide that budget, and that's something we're currently in the works of. altogether.
Okay. Yeah, budgeting and cost is something that balancing that across different teams is definitely something that we hear often from our customers. It's a challenge. So on that note, I'm really curious, out of the things you've listed there, how did you find solutions? Maybe you can give us a few examples of what's been successful there.
Yeah, so we really leverage Slack a lot. So we created one channel so that way any teams could ask questions through that one channel if they're running into issues or just even need to be set up in SmartLing because they don't know how to do that yet. We made sure that we had documentation so we can my team doesn't have to spend a ton of time and like tell every single person the same thing over and over again. So we can just send them the documentation, let them self-serve, and then as they have questions or if they run into any issues, we can then help them at that point. I would also say that really the centralizing within my team to help make sure that we're the only ones within the SmartLink tool really helping do that troubleshooting is helpful. So that way we're aware of all the issues and can make sure that we're avoiding them for other projects later down the road. And then our translation memory, we're really leveraging SmartLink to its fullest in terms of translation memory because when you're talking about taking people out of the mix, especially when they're like, hey, I'm the expert in this. I live in this country. This is what I do. Making it doesn't helping them understand that we don't have to pay every single time for the string that goes through that was the same that it was before, and that we're only paying for the new stuff and that they get to focus on their jobs has really helped everyone feel better about the fact that we are leveraging one single source to be able to translate all of our content.
What approach does a firm take when it comes to translation mix?
So currently we're just using human translation because we wanted to ensure for the finance industry that the regulations we are consistent with and that we are providing the most accurate information possible. Now that we've built Canada to a certain extent, we have translation memory built up. And so we know that we can start to look at some of our different content types that are a little bit not as frequently used. So like our help center content compared to our site strings, we will always keep our site strings human translated, but our help center content, we probably can start to look at machine translation and potentially like with the post editing, being able to mix in the AI component as well. So we can cut our costs down a little bit in the Canadian sense. But as we go into different countries, we will continue to use human translation for everything until we get that translation memory built out to the point where we're comfortable to actually look at using machine translation.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. And you mentioned obviously Affirm is in the finance space, and you mentioned that's why you are taking more of a human first approach at the moment. Of course, a large part of the reason for that is you have very specific terminology that you use. Could you walk us through how you've approached building up that glossary of terms, and how do you maintain it and manage it?
Yeah, so we started with a very small subset. Like I think we only had like 3 words in our glossary for a while, um, which is super small. So it's been basically as my team does that translation review step at the very end, they're identifying different terms that they think we need to validate. Is this a Canadian French term or is this a French term, like validating that it truly is Canadian French. And they're kind of building out a list for us. And then every quarter, I bring that to our internal legal and compliance teams so that way we can validate what are the actual terms that we should be using. Are we using the correct one? If anything needs to change, we update that and provide that back out to SmartLink so that way we can make sure that we're consistent across the board no matter where the content's being developed.
Okay, that's very interesting. Yeah. Okay. So tell us what's next for Affirm when it comes to localization.
So what's next is we're really expanding and growing now into our different markets. Last year, when we kind of paused a little bit, it gave us the time to actually make sure that all of our different projects were set up to the best we possibly could in terms of as much automation so we can scale quickly. We are looking at moving into like our UK market, which is not a secret. That is something that we're currently working on. And also just in terms of our Canadian French, just getting that into a more stable state where we can save costs by leveraging machine translation in that space now that we've built that out as far as we have.
Okay. Do you have any tips that you would give someone else or another company in a similar position to you or a firm that's trying to scale localization kind of despite macroeconomic constraints?
Yeah, I would say one, if you've never been a part of a localization process before or the industry, really get to know the terms that are used so that way you can speak intelligently and build out a solution that's best for your business. And two, I would say understanding your company's different inputs. So, what are the different types of systems that you have that you are storing content that you need to send to SmartLing? And then work with SmartLing to figure out what is the best way to connect them and figure out what you can automate as much as possible, because that will save you a lot of time. And then third, I would say make sure that you figure out your KPIs. So, understanding your company's key performing indicators and how translation fits into that and what it is that you are being expected to do. So that way you spend the right time and energy on that and you can show the benefits that the company is gaining through those KPIs.
Very good. Great. Okay. Well, thank you, Darcy. I really enjoyed our chat today and speak to you soon. Thank you.